In this video, let's go through step by step in Figma how to create this new liquid glass effect from Apple. So there's two parts to it. There's the outer effects that we're going to set on the button, and there's also a texture which gives it the liquid glass effect when you hover over items. So let's go through both of them now. So to start with, let's just make a button. It doesn't have to be a button, it can be an icon or it could be a modal, whatever you want it to be, but let's just start with a button. Click T and type out your word, then press Shift A to apply auto layout. And now this is just normal setup of stylizing your button. Let's round the corners all the way. And now come down and apply a fill and make sure it's a white fill. And then let's set it at 1%. So it's still there, but you can barely see it. And now this is how we're going to stylize the button. So the first thing we're going to do is apply effects to it. So this is similar to if I made a previous video where I made a skeuomorphic beveled button. It uses a lot of the same effects as that one. So we're going to be adding some inner shadows to this button, which is going to give it that nice soft glow around the outside. So the first inner shadow that we're going to add is going to be adding the top glow. So first make the color white, so 6 Fs, and we're going to make it about 20 to 30%. You can play around at this stage if you want to make it stronger or weaker. This is really just a starting spot. And then we want to make it quite tight. So we want to make the X1 and the Y1. And then we want to bring the blur down to about 2. As you can see, that's reducing it. If I pump it up more, you can see how it's not as strict. It blurs out further. So we want to bring it down to about 2, just so that you get this nice subtle glow around the top. So that's our first inner shadow. Now we want to add another inner shadow. This will add the bottom line. So we just added the top soft shadow, and now we're going to add the bottom inner shadow. So we want to do the same thing with this second shadow as the first one and change it to white so you can see it. And now we want to reduce this one down, maybe somewhere about 10 to 15%. But we want this one to actually be more at the bottom. So to do this, we want to get the X and go into minus instead of positive. So -1. Let's bring the Y down to about -1 or 2. And then the blur about 2 as well. So you can just kind of see the defined area there. And now we want to add one more inner shadow. Same as before, change the color to F. 6 F is the color code for white. Now we want this one to just be more of a general, to give it a bit more of a background color and a bit more depth to it. So we want this one to be centered. So make the X and the Y axis 0. And let's bring the blur up a little bit. About 10, that just makes it a little bit more defined. So this is the start of our button. So if we take this as an example, if we drag this across to an image, it's not really giving us the right effect so far. You're going over it, but you're not really getting that interesting warp effect or that liquid glass. So let's go through how you add that in now as well. So click R on your keyboard and draw a rectangle. And look at about the size of your button. So my button is 70 by 31. So let's make this rectangle 70 by 31. And let's just make it a little bit bigger. So +20, +20 just as a starting spot. Let's name all of our layers quickly. So this will be texture. So now I'm going to do it on top of the image here so you can see in real time what the effects are actually doing. So you can kind of play around with it and get a bit more of an idea of what you think is right. So first off, let's make our rectangle white. And let's bring it down to 1% opacity. Now come down to your effects. And what we want to add first off is a background blur effect. So you can see already that's giving that interesting blur, but it's not really the right warping yet. So you can play around with this if you want it to be more blurry or less blurry. I have it at about 2 or 3, depending on what feels right. And then the next effect you need to add is you actually want to add a texture that Figma just brought in recently at Config 2025. And now if we start all the way down at 1, you can see how that's quite a sharp texture. It kind of looks like glass, but it's actually quite sharp at the moment. And as we bring this number up, it starts getting much smoother. But if you keep bringing it all the way up to about around 90 or so, a really interesting thing happens when you also bring up the radius. So if the radius is all the way down, you can see how straight it is. It's barely warping these shapes at all. But if you start bringing up the radius, you start getting a very interesting, the shape itself is warping, but then also everything behind it is getting this really interesting warp effect to it as well. So let's bring it up to about 30. And now what you want to do is select your texture and cut it. So Command X, and then select your button and press Command V to paste it inside. But now you want to select Position Absolute or Ignore Auto Layout. And you want to center it. And now send it to the back. And come up to your button here, which is your outside container, and click Clip Content. Also, to make this texture responsive, so as you drag your button bigger and smaller, it'll actually respond. Make sure you select your texture and come up to the position here. And make sure that it's aligned left and right and aligned top and bottom. So now if you drag it bigger or smaller, the texture will scale accordingly. I just click Command Y to see the outlines, but you can kind of see how that's happening. So now back to our button, you can see straight away what a cool effect that is bringing on. So now as we drag this over our image, you can see that real liquid glass kind of effect coming into play. As it goes over things, it warps it, and it makes everything look very interesting. And that's how in Figma you can create Apple's new liquid glass effect. Thanks so much for watching. YouTube reckons that you'll like this video next.